Going to go over some options you have at Cal Poly for self-care.
Yes, thank you, Dustin. I appreciate that. Yeah, so seeing how it is, midterm season, right? We want to, also let each of you all know that, to give a brief reminder that Cal Poly does offer several, free support sources, resources such as counseling and psychological services, CAPS, the Care Center, and Poly Pantry, right? These are all resources that are available to each of you as students. If you would like additional information or any assistance with connecting with any of these resources, you have us as ramp staff that can help provide more information about that, as well as the tutors also available to help as well. And then I will also hand it off to Laura to share the purpose of this event and introduce our speaker as well.
Thank you. So really quickly, before we start, I just want to share what typically is our purpose for Professional Spotlight event. So every fall and spring, we invite an individual who comes from a similar background as our participants to present to our Professional Spotlight attendees. And these individuals will share their story, share maybe obstacles that they've overcome, perseverance tips, and advice for participants who are interested in our speaker's career field. We strive to offer various professions and backgrounds represented to allow all students the opportunity to gain insight on how to navigate college and prepare for potential careers. We hope through this event you will leave feeling motivated to pursue new ideas, seek out new opportunities and relationships, and that will help you succeed at Cal Poly and beyond. And moving into our speaker introduction, as Carlos mentioned, our speaker today is Pedro Carrillo, and he is the director of the Educational Talent Search at CPP. He earned his bachelor's degree in philosophy and master's in public administration, both at Cal Poly Pomona. And Pedro is a trio champion. As an undergraduate student, he was a ramp tutor. I don't know if anybody knew that for about a year. And then he moved on to tutor for the Upward Bound program, also here at Cal Poly. And in high school, he was an Upward Bound participant. I've had the pleasure of and honor of working with Pedro on various projects. We have collaborated on like grant writing many, many times and for many, many years, and also Trio Day celebrations. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Pedro.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Laura, and the entire RAMP team for having me. I always feel like it's an honor when I get asked to speak, especially since I know that, like many of your students, I myself am a first generation student, come from a low income background. So I'm going to share a presentation and then we'll get started. So let me go ahead and share. It's not letting me share. For some reason, it's not letting me share. So is it possible if I can drop that in Teams really quick? And if I
Yeah,
can
yeah.
have somebody share that for
Hmm.
me, please? Let me go ahead and drop it to you. Without,
Yeah. You should have permission to, so I'm not sure.
yeah, I don't know why it's saying that it doesn't let me. But let me go ahead and put it in there, and then we'll go ahead and start.
And did you
Okay,
drop
I
it?
went ahead.
Okay, got it.
Yeah,
It's coming
yeah.
now.
And if someone can just share that,
Yes, sir.
perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In the meantime, while Laura's doing that again, thank you all for being here today. We know that you being here means a lot to not only the program, but also in terms of getting additional information from these presentations. So my name is Pedro Carrillo, and if we can go to the next slide. Before I get started on who I am and my story, I do want to talk a little bit about some key themes that you're going to be seeing as I go into the presentation. And I want you to kind of keep in mind as I go through my story. The first one is what we call pivotal moments. And pivotal moments are transformative events that could potentially change the course that you are on. There are those big events that happen to people that could make you go one way or another. So keep that in mind as I go through that. The next one is resiliency. Resiliency is defined as the capacity to withstand or to recover quickly from difficulty or having toughness, right? So how quickly you bounce back from a setback, a bad grade, anything like that. You can go to the next slide. And then, of course, you might have heard this one quite a bit of times, imposter syndrome. That is the persistent inability to believe that one's success is deserved or has been legitimately achieved as a result of one's own efforts or skills. Or to put it in a basic way, it's the idea that you might feel like you're not good enough, that maybe there was a mistake made in, for example, in getting accepted to college. Maybe you weren't really that great as a student, right? Those kind of self-doubt, that's imposter syndrome. So we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. So I'm going to start with who I am today, and where I've been, right? Let's start with who I am today. So I'm the director of the Educational Talent Search program here on campus. We are a program funded by the Department of Education. And what I do is I'm the lead administrator. So I make sure that our program, the mission is outlined, our program objectives are met. I'm in charge of programming. I'm in charge of our budget. I'm in charge of hiring staff. I'm in charge of making sure that the services that we told the Department of Education are being given to the community. So our program works with 500. Each of our programs, I have 2 talent search programs. Each of our programs works with 500 high school students, and all of them are first generation and or low income. And our goal is to help them get to college, right? So we work with these students by offering tutoring. We offer additional Saturday classes. We offer a summer program. We offer advising. So our goal is to help these students go off to whatever post-secondary goal they have, right? So we serve as kind of that resource for them, that additional resource for them. I've worked in education for over 24 years, and I just have a couple of pictures here. The very first picture there on the left is my very first professional day in 2003 at 23 years old. That was my very first day on the job. Next to that one is a picture of my 15 year when they were celebrating. Every year they celebrate staff depending on how long they've been there. And I had been there 15 years when that picture was taken. And this is a more recent picture, is just the picture that's kind of used on the website for myself. So I've been working in education for over 24 years. Go to the next one. And here are some of my educational accomplishments. I have a master's degree in public administration from Cal Poly Pomona, and I graduated with a 3.9 GPA. I have a bachelor's degree in philosophy with an emphasis on law and society. Now, I did that because I initially wanted to go to law school, and I had heard that philosophy students score really well on what's called the LSAT, which is what you need to take in order to go to law school. Think of it like an SAT, but for law school, right? But then I got involved in education, so that's where my passion ended up staying. I got and I had a 3.3 GPA in college, and then in high school I had a 3.6 GPA. And I always ask my students when I talk about my story, I ask them, would you say I'm successful? Would you say based on all of this, would you say I'm successful? And most of my students say, yeah, you've done well, right? But the thing about it is the students always see where I'm at now. They don't always know where I came from, right? Whenever you see a professional person, someone that you want to be someday, a professor, you see someone who's an engineer, you see someone on the news, and they're a doctor. Everyone has a story of where they came from. They weren't just born and all of a sudden they have what they have, right? There's a journey there. So I'm going to go ahead and go into the journey and what led me to all of these accomplishments. Go to the next slide. So a little bit about my background. I'm a first generation student. Both of my parents do not have any educational schooling here in the United States. My father got up to high school, and my mother only had a middle school education. I also come from a low income background. Both of my parents were working 7 days a week for the most part, most of the time for me growing up. And Spanish was my very first language. For a long time, the only thing I could say is my birthday, September 29th. So people would ask me, what's your name? And I'd say September 29th. They'd be like, oh, what time is it? September 29th. Why? Because my parents only spoke Spanish. So it was very, very difficult for me to learn English for a while. And I have a couple of pictures here just from of me in high school, and then, of course, my high school graduation. But interestingly enough, I ended up learning English and reading English a lot better when I started playing video games at the age of 5 years old. So my parents, because they worked, no, sorry, 6 or 7 days a week, they didn't really have time to spend with us. So my dad saved up some money and bought me a Nintendo, and that's what I would play, right? And there was a game I used to play when I was 8 years old. It's called The Legend of Zelda, and it had a lot of reading. You had to kind of go through and get all the clues, and right. So I forced myself to read because I was so interested in trying to get through this game that I forced myself to read, and that's how my English improved. Okay, let's go on to the next one. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the pivotal moments that happened in my life that I think really shaped where my career went or where I ended up going in terms of my education and just kind of my personal life as well. So the first one I want to talk to you about is fourth grade. So in elementary school, I didn't go to a local elementary school. They used to bus us to. So I lived in a really poor area, and for whatever reason, we didn't have an elementary school close to us. So they would bus us to a wealthier area, and all the neighborhood kids would get bused to this wealthier area. And I remember I always wanted my parents to get involved in my schooling. I was so happy with what I was doing in school that I wanted them to be a part of it. So I finally convinced my parents to go to our fourth grade back to school night. And when my parents got there, because they didn't really speak English, the teacher completely ignored them. They sat there waiting to be approached by the teacher, waiting to be talked to. No one ever came to them. The teacher never acknowledged them. The teacher never even acknowledged me. It's almost like I wasn't in his class. So my parents were just kind of looking around, and they would see some of the projects that the students were working on, and they would ask me, "Oh, are you part of that project?" And I would be like, "No, I didn't even know there were students that were doing that." So there was additional things and additional resources that other students were getting that I wasn't, but I didn't know that. So my parents got frustrated and they're like, well, let's go. Why are we here? There's no reason. Nobody's really paying attention to us. No one's really acknowledging us. And that was the last time my parents ever went to any school event I ever had, besides graduation, right? So that to me was a pivotal moment because it really showcased how at that time I felt like the teacher didn't really care to acknowledge my parents or make an effort to talk to my parents about my schooling, even though there was a language barrier. I could have been that person that translates, right? But they were completely ignored. So my parents didn't really feel like they were welcome there. Then our elementary school got a sixth grade. We were one of the first elementary schools to get sixth grade. It wasn't really common back then. It used to end at fifth and then you go to middle school. So one of the things I really grew to love was reading, writing, and English. I really excelled at it. I was terrible at math, but I really loved English. So I remember for the sixth grade spelling bee, what our teacher did is she lined us all up against the wall, and we all had to spell. And as you misspelled the word, you would sit down. And the last two kids would get to represent our class for sixth grade. So it went around, and all of my friends were like, "Oh yeah, I'm just gonna get out. I don't want to do this, right?" But I was excited, right? I was like, "Oh my God, spelling! Yeah, I can do this." So I ended up getting picked along with another student named Nathan to represent our sixth grade class. So we went off to the spelling bee and we had other classes there, and it came down the last two kids to me and Nathan. So we would spell back and forth, and finally he got one wrong. I spelled it correctly and then spelled the next word correctly, and I won the sixth grade spelling bee for my class for the school. And I was so excited. I had never won anything like that before academically. So at recess, I remember being there, and a kid named Brian came up to me. It was by the handball courts. Back then, they used to have these big brown handball walls. And he grabbed me by the shirt and he told me, I can't believe you won. Your parents weren't even here. Nathan's parents were here. You don't even speak English. Like, wow, I can't believe you won. Your parents weren't even here. They were probably cleaning houses. And then a teacher or a proctor, I can't remember what it was, walked by, and I guess that kind of scared him off and he ran off. But at that moment, I was like, what just happened? Like, why was this kid so mad that I won the spelling bee? Like, why was this kid so angry at me for winning something, right? I just didn't understand it at the time. So then I go home, right? And I'm like, okay, well, at least I can show off this medal to my parents. I have this medal. And I said, look, mom and dad, I got this medal. And my parents were so confused. They were like, so you got an award for doing something you're supposed to know how to do in school? And I was like, no, mom, you don't get it. Like they did this, all these kids. And they're like, yeah, that just means you can do it, right? That's not what you're supposed to do. So they didn't really understand what that award meant for me. That they didn't understand what that award, what I had to do to get that, right? And I don't blame them. They don't understand the school system here in America. So it really diminished me. And it really made me feel like, wow, maybe this isn't a big deal. And I hung up the medal and it ended up turning green. But I remember because of what happened with Brian and because of what happened with my parents not really showing that they were proud, I didn't study for the district spelling bee. I kind of let it go and didn't take it seriously. And then when the district spelling bee came out, I lost on the very first word. So that's a pivotal moment for me because I made a choice to let those things bring me down, right? And let me fail with regard to that. So then I want to jump to my eighth grade teacher from Harvard. So in eighth grade, I had an English teacher who was amazing. Everyone loved her. She just motivated us to do really good work. And we found out she was a teacher that came from Harvard. She graduated from Harvard University. And I remember me and my friends were talking to her one time and we were kind of asking her like, "What are you doing here?" And she was like, "What do you mean, what are you doing here?" I'm like, "Yeah, you're from Harvard. Why are you here at this poor school with those poor kids?" And I remember she shook her head and she said, "I'm so disappointed in you all." And we were all confused, like, why? And she said, "I'm disappointed in you that you don't think you're worthy of having the best. I'm disappointed in you because you don't think that you all deserve someone from Harvard, that you all don't deserve a good education." That day, I realized that we should be striving for better, that we should deserve the best, that we should demand the best, right? And she made me see that. She made me see that we are worth educating, that we are worth having good teachers. And that really changed. I really feel like that changed my view on education because up until then, I didn't really care for it as much. But after that, I was like, no, I got to take advantage of this. This is, this teacher really inspired me to care about my education at the eighth grade level, right? I still keep in touch with her today, which is amazing. And she continues to be an inspiration for me. Okay, we can go ahead and go to the next slide. So with regards to my family, I didn't really have any expectations from my parents. My parents just basically said, as long as you graduate from high school, that's good enough for us. And then you can either get a job or do whatever or go to school, whatever you want to do. But I did have a lot of family who would tell my parents that I would amount to nothing. I had a lot of family that would tell my mom and dad that I would end up doing drugs or selling drugs or being in a gang or getting involved in really bad activity based on how I used to dress or based on, the music I listened to. It was just really bad. So I had a lot of family expectations that were all kind of mixed, right? I had family that were kind of rooting for me to fail. And I also had family that didn't really understand what the education system is. So my parents just were like complacent with me doing whatever it is I wanted to do, right? So I didn't have that support that I wish I had in terms of, pushing me to go on and do and do better in school. I mean, I had a roof over my head. I'm thankful for that. I had food, but I didn't have that support education wise from a lot of my family. It wasn't until I got to high school that I joined the Upper Bound program in the 10th grade at the school I was at the time. And one of the things they did for us is they took us to the George Washington Carver Student Conference in 1996. And it was at Cal Poly Pomona. It was the first time that I had ever set foot on a college campus before. And it was just transformative for me. I love the campus, I love the conference, and I said that day, I'm going to go to school here. This is where I want to go. Just how powerful setting foot on a college campus was for me. And if it wasn't for the Upper Bound program, I would have never had that opportunity, right? So that was such an amazing experience for me. Unfortunately, I not unfortunately or fortunately, I did end up moving from that school. I ended up moving to the Inland Empire. And the last 2 months of my sophomore year, my parents still drove me back and forth to where living in where I was going to school, and we would pass Cal Poly on the 10 freeway, and every time we would pass it, I tell my mom, that's where I'm going to go to school. Mom, that's where I'm going to go to school. So to me, that going on onto the campus was such an amazing experience that I wanted to be there. So I'm going to fast forward to my senior year of high school and my friend Maria. So, I knew I wanted to go to college, but I was so lost, right? Because I wasn't in the Upper Bound program anymore. And actually, I wasn't really aware that we had an Upper Bound program at the school I was at until my friend Maria told me that she was in Upper Bound. So she would kind of hold me accountable. And she'd be like, "Hey, have you applied for college yet?" And I was like, is that out already?" And she's like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah. Go get your college application." Right? She would ask me like, "Hey, like, did you already apply for your FAFSA?" And I was like, "Oh no, I don't know. I don't have money for school." Well, that's what the FAFSA's for, right? It's good to get you money. So I'm really glad that I had a friend like that took everything she was learning from her Upper Bound program and sharing it with her friends and making sure that those of us that weren't in the program at the time were getting that help by her holding us accountable. So she pushed me to get a college application, and back then we didn't do the college applications online. They gave us it was a paper application that we had to grab, fill out, and mail in, right? So I went to the career counselor at our school, and as soon as I walked in, just by looking at me, she said, "Are you here to drop out, or are you here for adult school?" She didn't know my grades. She didn't know my educational aspirations. She just made a judgment based on how I looked. Now, in that moment, I could have said a lot of things to this person, but I chose not to. I looked down and I saw on the table that the CSU application was right there. I quietly grabbed it, picked it up, and walked out. That was a pivotal moment because had I said something, had I done something, I could have gotten in trouble. And I would have just proven this person right. And I didn't want to do that. Right? That was a moment that I had to decide, am I going to let this defeat me or am I going to move forward despite that? And yeah, I applied to Cal Poly and I got in. So my first year of college, I was super excited to take my English class because I loved English and I got nothing but A's in high school for my English class. The teacher was amazing, and I was so excited to turn in my first paper. And then when I got it back, I got a C, and it was marked all over the place. And I was like, wait, what? Like, I don't know what this is. A C in English? Like, that's so unusual. Like, what is this? I don't understand. So I went to her office hours and I asked her, I said, "Hey, what did I do wrong?" And she walked me through, grammatical mistakes. I rushed through it. I didn't answer certain prompts. And again, I could have said to myself, you know what? I can't do this. Because at that moment in time, I didn't think I was good enough for college. Like, wow, I'm used to getting an A and now I'm getting a C. Like, maybe they made a mistake letting me in. Like, maybe I'm not college material. But luckily, this professor made me realize, like, no, it's okay. You're going to grow. Think of when you were in middle school and then think of when you were in high school and how far you've come since then. Same thing is going to happen to college immediately from high school to college. It's a growing, you're going to grow, right? And she let me rewrite my paper and then I got an A, right? So I know as college students, sometimes we get those assignments or we get those grades that we're not always proud of, but it's a moment for you to stop and say, okay, am I going to improve from here? Or am I going to let that define me for the rest of my time here, right? So I really did my best to work on it, and I got a better grade. The other part of the equation, though, is that I hated math, right? And back then at Cal Poly Pomona, we used to have this thing where you had to take a test, and based on where you tested, you could get what is called remedial math, which is the math that comes before your college level math. So I ended up taking the test, and I got placed in Math 11. So there was three math levels. There was Math 10, 11, and 12, and I got placed in Math 11. And back then, there was this thing called Executive Order 665 that meant that you had to finish your entire remedial math within 1 year or you get kicked out of school. So I was under pressure to pass my math classes and get out of there. I took Math 11, I got a D. my first quarter, because back then we had quarter system, not semester. And then I took it again and I barely passed with the C. And then I took math 12 and I was working really hard because I only had that quarter and then summer to pass it, or else I'll get thrown out of the school. So I was working really hard, and I remember I would go to the game room. I know that's still a thing at Cal Poly. They took off all the arcades that they used to have, which was really cool. But I would go in there because I needed noise in the background. I tried studying in the library, and I'd be falling asleep, and I'm like, no, 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 I need noise. I need stuff going on, and I would do my homework in there. And I remember I was doing my homework, and two students came up to me, and they were like, I was doing my math homework, and they were like, "Hey, we're doing a study for psychology. Is it okay if we ask you some questions?" And I was like, sure, go ahead and ask me because I really need a break from this. So they asked me their questions. They were real simple, like, hey, how do you manage your time, stuff like that as a college student. And then after they were done, they looked at my math book and they were like, "Oh, are you helping your little brother or your little sister with their math homework?" And I was like, "No, this is my homework." And they were like, "Wow, that's really easy. I guess they just let anybody into this school." And then they walked away. Again, right? I felt terrible because I felt like I was dumb. Like, why can't I get this math? Like, is this math really that easy? Right? So it made me feel like I really didn't belong there, right? But I worked hard at it and I eventually passed with the C and I got done with math for that. Right? So luckily I got through that. Okay, let's go ahead and go to the next one. Okay, so I talked about my first college paper, but I do want to talk about what happened when I graduated from college. Being first generation low income doesn't just affect you when you're going to college. It affects you when you start your first job, your very first professional job. There was a lot of things that I didn't know how to do. My job required me to wear a tie every day. I had never tied a tie in my life. All the school dances, I clipped that thing on. I didn't tie it on. I clipped it on. Right. So I remember my mentor teaching me how to tie a tie because I didn't know. My dad didn't know how to do it. He was like, I don't wear those things. He was a mechanic. Right. So I had to learn something as simple as tying a tie. Another time I remember we were at a conference and I looked down, and if you've ever seen a place setting before, I was like, why are there so many forks here? Like that was so confusing to me. You just use one? And he's like, no, no, no. The way it works is uh outside in, right? The fork's on the outside first. You're gonna get like a salad or an appetizer. Then the other fork is gonna be for your main entree, and then the smaller one is going to be for your dessert. Little things like that that my dad never taught me because he wasn't a part of that particular world, right? So even being low income and first generation, that can affect you at a professional level when you start because you might not know these things, right? You might not have been taught these things, right? I had a really strong work ethic, but nobody taught me these minor things, right? So let's go back. I'm sorry, I still have one. So one of the things that I realize is that you're always learning constantly. Being first generation low income, you're learning all the time. You're constantly learning. You're constantly learning from other people. You're constantly learning from your mentors. So it's one of those things that you got to keep an eye for. Okay, go ahead. So what are the lessons learned and why why does any of this matter? First of all, if you do not define your path for success, others will try to define it for you. So, as you heard in my story, I had people that tried to define who I was and what I was meant to do. I had family that thought I was going to do bad. I had the career counselor who assumed I was dropping out. I had those two kids, or I'm sorry, I call college students kids. That's my fault. I had those two students that um, kind of made fun of me for taking lower level math. I didn't let that define me. I decided to define my success on my own. The other thing I want you to take away from this is that you are good enough and you are worthy of success, even if at times it doesn't feel that way. And I'm not going to lie to you, there's going to be times in college that you're going to feel like, are you good enough? Are you worthy of this? And the answer is yes. Yes, you are. The other thing I want to point out is that I didn't do this alone. I had a lot of people in my circle. For all the people that I spoke about that had a negative impact in my life, there was a lot of good people in my life that helped me. My friend Maria, my eighth grade teacher from Harvard, all the professional mentors I had, right? Laura doesn't know this, but I looked up to her when I was a tutor, and she was an advisor. She was in the position I wanted to be in someday, right? And I looked up to that. And to be able to work alongside of her as a colleague is such an honor to me. So always look for those professional mentorships, right? Support one another, right? All of your friends are in a similar boat. They're all in a similar struggle. Support one another, lift each other up, and find mentors that can help you along the way. Students often ask me, the high school students I work with anyway, why do you do what you do? Why did you go into education? The reason I do what I do is because someone did this for me. When I was young, I had people who helped me. Someone took the time to recognize my ability. Someone took the time to mentor me. And I feel like the only way I can really pay those people back is by doing this job and helping the next generation of kids. And I always tell my students, I want you to give back when you make it. That doesn't mean I want you to be an educator, not necessarily, unless that's what you want to do. But if you're a doctor, you're an engineer, you work in industry, go back to your community and show those kids that someone from their neighborhood made it. Show those kids that someone that sat in those same classrooms made it where they want to be, and be that inspiration and mentor for those kids. That's what I do because someone did it for me, and I'm really happy that over my long career, many students who have gone on have come back and said thank you. And you really helped me. And I just say to them, keep it going. Keep it going. Mentor others. Mentor the next generation after me. Right? Okay, we can go to the next slide. The final things I want to leave you with is remember that the time will pass by anyway. In 5 to 10 years, you want to look back on success or regret. So, for example, which one of the two sayings would you rather be saying in 5 to 10 years? Do you want to look back and say, I'm so glad I pushed through because I'm finished? I got my degree in my career? Or do you want to look back and say, if I wouldn't have stopped and if I would have just stuck with school, I would have been done by now. Sometimes we are afraid to do things because they take a lot of time. But the reality is it's going to pass by anyway. So where do you want to be at the end of that time? Do you want to look back and say, I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I'm done. Or do you want to look back and say, if only I would have done it, I would have been done. Right? So always remember that that's going to pass by anyway. So go ahead and put in the time, put in the work, get the help that you need in order to succeed. And there's plenty of people on campus that are here to help support you do that. Okay. I know I didn't share a whole lot about my career necessarily. I did mention a little bit about some of the things I did, but I felt that it's important for you all to see kind of some of the things that shaped me and some of the things that I went through to show you that someone who went through those can be successful. And maybe some of those things resonated with you. Maybe some of those things, for example, having family that might not understand what you're going through. There was many times when I had to tell my family, no, I'm not going to that quinceañera. Well, why not? Well, because I have to write a paper. My family didn't understand that. That was so weird to them, but I had to do what I had to do, right? So those are the things that as first generation low income students, we sometimes have to face. And I hope that you got something out of that. And I want to thank you all for taking the time to listen to my story. And hopefully it was helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Pedro. All right. So we do have a question in the chat. What is the best advice you could give to another student who lacks familial support or faces challenges of dealing with naysayers?
Sure. So what really helped me is surrounding yourself with people that do have that do support you, right? Being part of a program like RAMP is a big one. You have a whole support network there. Looking for those professors that you think you can build those relationships with, right? Going to office hours, especially if in the majors that you're in, is building those relationships, making friends with students that are in a similar position as you that are trying to get their education. It's really about counteracting a lot of that negativity with people that are going to give you positive affirmations and help you be your best, right? So the best advice I can give you is do your best to look and seek out that support network because it exists. And you have them. You just have to be able and open to look for them and surround yourself with that.
as a follow-up to that question, Pedro, when you got to Cal Poly Pomona as an undergraduate student, did you bring your family onto campus to kind of bridge your two worlds?
No, I didn't. And the reason I didn't wasn't because I didn't want to. It's just because as a college student, I I fell into that category where my parents made too much money for financial aid, but not enough to realistically put me through college. So what ended up happening is I had to work as a college student. I had three different jobs at a time. So I remember I would go to class, and then during my break, I'd go tutor for ramp. And then after my classes, I'd go tutor for upward bound. And then after upward bound, I'd come circle back to work on campus from like 6 to 9 p.m. So it was more of me being really busy, and I didn't really get a chance to bring them on. It wasn't until graduation that they saw the campus, which is really sad. I really do regret not bringing them on. It's just a matter of time. And then with my work schedule and my parents had to work all the time, they never really had a chance to see the campus. I do regret that though. I do wish I would have exposed them more to to the campus, and I know they would have loved it.
Right. Yes. We do have another question. What do you think is most important? Quality of a mentor excuse me, what do you think is the most important quality of a mentor when it comes to academic or career pursuits?
Um, let me see that question one more time. I just want to make sure I
Yeah.
understand it.
Yeah, I kind of butchered it a little bit at the beginning.
Okay. I think for me, what is the most important quality that you should look for in a mentor is someone that understands what you're going through and someone that has the ability to help you find the resources you need, and provide resources for you to further your educational goals. I know in college I tried to find mentors, and sometimes it never worked out because those people were really busy. They didn't really have the time to mentor me, and you're gonna find a lot of that sometimes, just because some people they don't have that ability to do that, based on their schedules or whatever they're doing. So you'll eventually realize which people are willing and able and available to be a mentor to you. And those are the ones you want to kind of surround yourself with. And mentors can come from so many different places. And not only that, but mentorships could be really brief too. You'd be surprised how many people helped me briefly, but it meant the world to me. So, for example, with my math. So, one of the things I didn't know was after I took math 12, I took a break from math. I was like, you know what? I don't want to do math until I have to. And then I started getting towards graduation and I was like, oh man, I got to take math. I hadn't done my college algebra yet or my statistics. So I went to sign up and I couldn't. And the university, I went to the math department. They were like, yeah, because your grade expired. And I'm like, what? Yes, if you don't take at that time, I don't know what the policy is
Yeah.
now, but at the time, if you don't take math within 3 quarters, your grade expires. So what the options they gave me were you can either take the test again and see where you place or start at math 10 again. And right away I was done. I was like, no, that's it. I'm not gonna graduate from college. Like it's over. And I was telling my one of my mentors this, and he said, "Go talk to someone at the LRC at the Learning Resource Center. I know someone that can help you." There used to be a person named Mark Greenwood there. I went to him and I said, "Mark, someone sent me to you. This is what's going on." And he kind of just chuckled and said, "Just go to Mount Sac." And I said, "What?" If you go to Mount Sac, they'll take your transfer. They'll place you in the appropriate class because you've already taken the other ones. You take it, you pass it, and you're done. I was like, "What?" And yeah, I went to Mount Sac. 5 weeks, I did my stats, I got it done, and I was on track to graduate. Super, super brief interaction that changed whether I graduated or not, right? So sometimes mentorships come in places you wouldn't expect it or are really brief, but they're just as important. So always keep an eye out for that and always be on the lookout for people that are able to help you in that way.
Wow, I didn't know that about you and Mark. Wow, no wonder why you loved him so much.
Yes, absolutely. I will always remember him for that. And you know what's funny is a lot of the times the people that we hold high like that, they might not even remember why. They might not even remember that interaction, but it doesn't matter. It meant something to me, and that's what you need to really look for.
Yeah, and I think that story is an example of perseverance, right?
Hmm.
How easily could we have said, okay, I got to start over again. That's what they told me I had to do.
Hmm.
And you're like, let me check with a few more people, and that led you to Mark. And, uh,
Exactly.
so if a door closes, keep knocking.
It's about resiliency. Um, Unfortunately for us, and when I say us, I mean students that come from low income first generation background. Sometimes we're looking for a reason to not do it. I sometimes say, when I was in college, I was like, oh, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe this isn't for me. And you just have to block that out and do your best to keep going because it's worth it in the end. And if it were easy, everybody would have a degree, right? That's what makes it special. So you have to do your best. And when I was a first generation low income student, I knew that I was behind my peers that were better prepared, that had parents that went to college. I knew that, but that doesn't mean that my degree is any less valuable than theirs. It doesn't mean that, my experience was any less valuable than theirs. It's possible because I'm here. And that's why I always start when I talk about my story about where I'm at so that you can see, oh, okay, this person has their degree, they have their career, they're doing well. Yeah, but it wasn't like that. Had you told the person who was taking math 12 that this is where I'd be, I wouldn't have believed it because it seems so far away and it seems so distant. And I guess that's what I want everyone to really realize is that the time is going to pass by. You're going to get there. You just have to put in the work. You have to put in the work and you have to put in the time.
Yeah, and I think that leads really good to Chal's question, which was, how did you motivate yourself and stay determined on your path when people didn't believe in you?
So for me, I had a lot of motivations. One is proving people wrong. I wanted to prove a lot of the people that didn't believe in me wrong. But one of the biggest things for me, I remember I used to work at Taco Bell my freshman year in college. I worked at Taco Bell, and I remember I had this manager who was super mean to me. Like she was incredibly mean to me. And I remember she one time because I worked the register, right? And you couldn't go home until they counted your register to make sure that your money was accurate to what you sold or whatever. And I remember one time I wanted to go home, and she's like, "Well, you can't go home until I count your register." And I can't count your register right now. So she made me wait 30 minutes after my shift. And then she's like, you know what? I don't have time to count your register right now. Go home. All right, I went home. She ends up calling me. You need to come back to the store right now. You're short $100. I'm like, what? There's no way. So I go back to Taco Bell, and then when I get there, she's like, oh, never mind. I counted it again. You're fine. And then there was a time when I was scheduled to work on a Sunday. I show up and she's like, don't clock in. I'm like, what? She's like, yeah, don't clock in. But I'm on the, she's like, I don't care. Don't clock in. It's not busy. I'm like, okay, so what do I do? Do I just stay? Like, I didn't know better at the time, right? But I stayed there and I waited. And then an hour later, she's like, okay, you can clock in now. I didn't know at the time. I was ignorant of the law, but I could have just left because I wasn't on the clock. But I didn't know that. I really, really, really despise this person. But then I came to find out she made about 25 cents more than I did. And I said to myself, I started realizing, well, maybe this is all this person has. This is the only thing they can do. I don't want that for me, right? I got to strive for better. And I'm not knocking that. That's all she had. That's all she had. That's what it is. I'm just saying that for me, I knew that this is not the kind of work that I wanted to do. I wanted to do more, right? I wanted to be, and that isn't to say that I didn't work at Taco Bell. I worked Taco Bell. I worked at Target. I worked at Sears. When that existed, I worked at Carl's Jr. on campus. Sometimes you have to take those positions, and that's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think it motivated me to finish school because I said to myself, if I don't finish school, what options do I really have? Right. So that became more viable to me by looking at the opportunities that could come if I finish school. And I also looked at my parents, and I said, I don't want to work 7 days a week like that. I remember my coming home for my first day of work, my first day of a professional work, right? And I told my dad, hey, Dad, I'm tired. And he just kind of chuckled at me. He's like, what do you mean you're tired? You've been in an air-conditioned office all day. I've been on my feet for 10 hours. Look at my hands, how dirty they are. Look how tired I am. I said, you know what, Dad, you're right. And he said to me, you know, I know, I know that you don't work physically like I do. You work with your mind. And he said, and that ages far less quickly than your physical body does. And he said, the reason you're able to do what you do is because of the paper that you have. He called it the paper. He's talking about my degree. So he eventually got the value of what I was doing after he saw that I was making as much as him right out of college that took him 20 plus years to get to. And again, my dad works way harder than me. I will always admit that. But getting a degree afforded me an opportunity to not have to work as hard with my body in order to have a career and a degree.
Thank you. It is 12:50, so we want to thank Pedro. Thank you all for coming. And Carlos put the survey in the chat. I just dropped it in there one more time. We do appreciate you guys giving us some feedback. Thank you so much, Pedro, for taking the time to share your story with us. I think I took Carlos's thunder. I think we had agreed he was going to do the closing. But if you have anything to add, Carlos, go ahead. And anybody wants to stick around for a few more minutes, if you do have a burning question, we can stick around maybe for another 5 minutes, Pedro. Anything to add, Carlos?
Just, again, like giving a, kind of virtual applause, for Pedro, thank you for sharing your journey and your story with us, right? I know, some of us, including myself, can resonate with the story and your journey that you've had. And, we do appreciate your attendance as well as everybody's attendance here at today's event. And again, we ask everyone to kindly just complete that survey as well. And thank you, Pedro.
Absolutely. Again, thank you all for having me and the students. Thank you for being here. I know you're taking the time out of your day to listen to me and my story, and just know that that is incredibly appreciated by me and by the staff. So thank you for being here as well.
Bravo. We have a lot of thank yous in the chat. Yeah, definitely. We can, your story does resonate with probably all of us in one way or another. Anybody have any questions, last minute questions for Pedro?
Thank you. Hi, Pedro. Thank you for being here with us today. I think my question would be like, if we want to keep in touch with you, like, do you have LinkedIn or email that I can say hi to you sometime in the future? Your story is it made me like a little bit emotional today.
Absolutely. I will leave my contact information with Laura and the advisors, and you all are more than welcome to reach out. And if you want to pick my brain, if you want to ask me additional questions, you're thinking about different careers, things like that, please, by all means, reach out to me. I'm always willing to help students that have questions. So please, I'll go ahead and leave that with the ramp staff, and they can forward that on to you all.
Oh, go ahead and put your email in the chat too. He's at Cal Poly, so he can't hide. Yeah. Okay. And if you're ready to log off, you guys go on ahead. You're probably like, wait, somebody might ask a really good question. But I know some of you guys have class or work at 1 o'clock. Thank you, Pedro. I'm glad we finally got you in here after all
Yes,
these years.
absolutely. Thank you so much. And again, it's always a pleasure, and it's always great to be able to share that with students. And I always tell kids, again, I keep saying kids, just know I'm old. That's why I say that. But I always tell students, the music changes, the style of dress changes, but a lot of the issues that first generation low income students face remain the same. Dealing with imposter phenomenon, dealing with resiliency, and those pivotal moments in our lives that dictate what we do from then on. Those are all very heavy things to deal with. And just know that there are people who have already gone through that can guide you. So thank you all again.
Mhm. Yeah, like you said, somebody said the naysayers are there. And sometimes we're our own worst enemy, right? So I think you definitely gave us a glimpse of that struggle. And when you said, sometimes it's easier to say, "Oh, I guess there's an obstacle. I guess I can't do that after all." Because I remember having those moments where, I had an opportunity, but I almost like looked for any excuse not to take it, right? Because it would be harder to take it than to just say,
Yeah.
yeah.
Put it this way, there would be times when I do my homework and I'd find the instructions to my alarm clock. And all of a sudden that became the most fascinating thing in the world because I'm looking for a reason to distract myself, right? It happens. It happens.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Good point. The instructions to the alarm clock. Intriguing. Did you know the alarm clock can be set in two different modes?
Exactly. When it's math or that, I want to know about the alarm clock, right?
Do you still have a phobia of math?
Yes and no. I have a phobia of math when you start putting letters in there. But when you don't have to do that, it's great. So in my career, I don't really have to do algebra. I do have to be good at math in terms of arithmetic, right? Because we have a budget. We have to make sure that we calculate, we forecast. That's a whole nother thing. I'm okay with that. It was just stuff like,
Yeah.
A plus B plus C, elemental P. I can't do that.
A
Once they
squared
started
plus
putting,
B squared.
yeah, once they put the letters in the numbers together, I was done. I was like, no, I don't want to do this.
But you like letters. You want a spelling bee.
You know what? I always tell students I can write you a really great essay on why I'm terrible at math. I could, but no, you know what? And I say that in jest, but it's true. A lot of students, you typically are better in one subject than they are in others. There's those students that are gifted all around, which is great. But then you have students that might struggle. So, for example, for me, I used to tutor students that were struggling with English. And it would really give me a different perspective. Like, I understand where they're coming from. And it would make me work that much harder to help them because I know what it's like to struggle in a subject, right? And they're struggling in a subject that I happen to be very good at. So I would always love, that's why I worked with Ramp or Crisp at the time, because I really felt that I was helping students. And I'll never forget when I was helping a student and she told me that she made progress, how happy she was that she made progress writing a paragraph, something that I took for granted. I was like, wow, like that means a lot because I helped this student progress. So I get it, and that's where I understand and I appreciate the tutoring programs and the help that's available for students. It's really, asking for help is not a sign of weakness. It isn't. Everybody needed it at some point. Even the most wealthy, the most successful people had help. And it's important to really understand and accept that asking for help is okay. We need to normalize, asking questions in class, um, asking for help, getting tutoring. It's all okay to do. And it's all things that a lot of us did in order to get where we are.
And as a first gen student, the help isn't necessarily built in as it might be for a continuing generation student. And so, yeah, it does require us to be humble or vulnerable to ask for that help. Absolutely. All right. Well, Pedro, again, we thank you a bunch for taking time out to share your story and being vulnerable to share some of the tough spots, right? And it sounds like your story resonated with plenty of people. And we'll see you all again soon. Have a good day, everybody.